Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank you all for joining us. First and foremost, I want to thank and recognize Saskatchewan's teachers. They've all returned to in-person work this week when most of their colleagues in other parts of the country did not. Teachers and students are on the front lines of this pandemic. Teachers and principals are dealing with staff shortages, high rates of absenteeism due to transmission, and taking on contact tracing in addition to their regular duties. In the government's news conference this morning, Minister Duncan also thanked and recognized teachers. While the recognition is appreciated, we need more. Teachers, students, and families need and deserve more tangible support. Schools are the only place where people are required to gather in high numbers with fewer layers of protective measures. Despite everyone's best efforts, social distancing, reduced contacts, and proper mask wearing is more difficult to achieve in a school setting. On December 30th, we called for a 2-day delay to the return to school to allow teachers and principals to put additional measures in place before students returned. This brief pause would have provided time to make adjustments to schedules, cohorts, ensure access to appropriate masks, communicate and change procedures impacted by the revised isolation rules, and assess the impact of Omicron on staffing. Unfortunately, this did not happen. As Minister Duncan stated this morning, he didn't feel there was a value or benefit in doing so. It is just a few days into the return to school, and we are already hearing of significant challenges in our schools. As Omicron spreads, similar to what we've seen in other provinces, the situation is only going to worsen in the coming weeks. In-class learning is vital and important. And that's exactly why we asked for a 2-day delay to help protect students' health and access to in-person learning. We are calling on the Government of Saskatchewan to provide N95 masks to all staff and students in our schools, to mandate masks and proof of vaccination for all activities, including extracurricular, to update the definition of fully vaccinated to include booster shots, open up eligibility for booster shots to all those turning 5 this year who were born in 2017, and to reinstate the education sector response planning team. This morning, both Minister Duncan and Dr. Shahab said interruptions to in-person learning are inevitable, but were unable to articulate how this decision will be made. So we are also calling on the government to communicate what the threshold is for classes and schools to move to online learning, the process for monitoring and implementing moves to online learning, and provide support to schools to implement these changes so it does not become the responsibility of our principals. Dr. Shahab indicated it is important we attempt to slow the surge. While it is unfortunate that we lost that opportunity to implement these measures before students returned, doing so now would still help to ensure in-person learning continues. Thank you, and I'll now open it up for questions from the media. And I see Alex Salome there. Jay, if you could turn on his mic.
Yep, Alex can turn his own. Great way to go, Alex.
Alex Salome.
Howdy. I guess we've seen certain districts in America move to remote learning. We've seen Quebec move back to remote learning. I guess from other jurisdictions, you've mentioned that having that in-person ability to be in the classroom is really important, but how do you weigh the benefits, cost benefit, let's call it, between in-person and remote when we have these surging cases right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Alec. We know that for students' mental health and for teachers' preference as well, in-person learning is really important. we would really prefer to, at all costs, have in-person learning. The problem is what we're doing now is just kind of entering into an unknown stage where we didn't know what our staffing complement was going to be. So even if we could continue, to guarantee that students' learning experience is going to be safe and their learning environment will be safe, and just related to that, we have students in our classrooms due to inclusive learning, which, inclusive practices is really important concept, but it puts higher needs students into our schools. And if we can't guarantee their safety, if we can't guarantee the safety of the general student body due to staff shortages, then we need to, look at what we're doing and really reconsider whether we can run schools in person the way we are. So our preference is to run them in person. However, and that's why we asked for a couple of days in order to assess staffing complements and understand what the impacts were. So yeah, it's difficult to put an actual tangible number on at what point we would look at going online. That's for school divisions to determine. But at the same point, it's unfortunate because some of these mitigating practices would have allowed us to ensure the sustainability of in-person learning. So, and now, like I say, we're impacted severely that we have lots of schools across the province that are short on staff and unable to provide substitute teachers. Go ahead, Al.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit, just about the absenteeism that you're seeing right now with teachers as it exists on day 2, I suppose, of the resumption of classes?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we knew going into this, we were having lots of teachers contact us indicating that they have a rapid test that's positive. What's the next steps? And so anecdotally, we knew that lots of teachers are contacting us with concerns about their ability to report to work. And that's part of why, we didn't know what the number is. We are not the employer. We don't run the HR in each school division. We don't have access to that information. If a teacher chooses to call in sick, or calls in sick, they do that to their division office, not to the Federation. So if they choose to share that information with us, they can. And in many situations, that's what was happening as teachers were concerned about testing positive on a rapid test. So more to the point, we're hearing of some significantly high numbers of schools being impacted. One school indicated that they were down 8 staff members. Another school indicated that they were down 16 staff members. The school with 8 staff members was provided 2 substitute teachers. And so, whether that's educational assistants or teacher shortages, 8 on a staff is considerable. 16 is very considerable. And it impacts our ability for, offering a safe learning environment for students. So a lot of the information that we receive is anecdotal because, as I said, we don't have access to school HR records. However, my understanding is that school divisions are very concerned right now about their ability to continue maintaining in-person classes with the shortages that they're seeing. Any school divisions that aren't, I would strongly suggest that the school administration get into the schools, get into the classrooms and see the teacher coverage that's going on, because there is so many teachers being pulled out of different assignments, being put into general classrooms, and in those situations, we can only sustain that for so long before we end up with teacher burnout and teachers not being able to be in the classroom. So, Bonnie Allen.
Yeah, good afternoon. I have 3 questions here. One is on vaccinations for students. The uptake for 5 to 11-year-olds really isn't that high. It hovers between 30 to 40% in most regions. What would you see the province do if vaccinations are supposed to be part of the response, and what role could the schools play in that?
Yeah, it's a frustrating situation where government seems to be relying on vaccinations and rapid tests to get us through this. And yet both of them don't have an immediate impact when we get hit by a significant surge or variant like Omicron that we're seeing here. They both take time to take effect. We asked, as the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation executive, way back in August, I believe it was August 16th, for all staff and students in our schools to be have mandatory proof of vaccination. And unfortunately, the staff component didn't come into place until I believe it was in most divisions in around early November. And then, of course, we still don't have mandatory vaccinations for students. So we're relying on that. But at the same point, not compelling people. If you want to participate in in-learning class, in-person classroom learning, we're not compelling students to take part in that. So, and again, with the rapid tests, that's waiting for people to actually have a positive result. By then it's too late. Why are we not putting protective measures in place? So you said
you talked about teachers having to take on contact tracing. Given that we're talking about staffing shortages and then adding extra loads, how would you see the schools and teachers carrying out this added task?
Yeah, and it's a complete recipe for disaster. Staff is going to burn out quickly. What's not seen there as well is that staff, when they finish each class, they need to put lessons up onto whatever format of online learning they're using, Google Classroom, that sort of thing, but they're also getting pulled out of any preparation time that they might have or any spare time in order to do supervision. So yeah, and contact tracing is just one more thing on the plate. To me, asking teachers and principals to do contact tracing is just a complete admission on government's part that they are overwhelmed and that they have not handled this effectively.
My last question is, we're seeing videos of on social media of large high school parties over New Year's. Are you aware of these parties and what concerns do you have, Patrick?
Yeah, I did see that just this morning circulating on Twitter. Very frustrating. And I think what the problem here is that government's approach to say that they are not going to implement community restrictions sends the wrong message to the public. It sends the message that this isn't serious. This is incredibly serious. Our ability to maintain in-person learning, the business community knows, and we're in favor of keeping in-person learning. The business community knows how important that is because our parents of our students are their labor force. And so it's absolutely critical that we continue in-person learning. However, when students go and participate in these kind of gatherings and are almost tempting themselves to get the virus, it completely undermines everything that we're doing. But again, that's on government to show that this is serious by implementing restrictions. And so as long as there's no restrictions in the community, we have to expect that the virus is going to enter into our schools. And as long as it enters into our schools, the business community is also going to be impacted.
It would seem like you're absolving parents and teenagers of responsibility there.
Absolutely. It's it's not absolving necessarily parents and teenagers. It's putting the onus of responsibility onto individuals. And unfortunately, individuals right now aren't making great choices and aren't understanding the severity of it. And so until that starts to happen, then they'll probably start to make better choices. But the problem is it's too late by that point. And, the number of people that are coming out of the hospital saying, oh yeah, I would have for sure got vaccinated if I knew how much this would have affected my lungs, or I've got long COVID and if I would have got vaccinated or could have got vaccinated earlier. And by then it's too late. So we need people to take it seriously, and the best way to take it seriously is to have a government that takes it seriously. We're the only jurisdiction that didn't have any restrictions on gathering sizes over the holiday, the only government that didn't delay the start to the school year or to the return to school after the holiday. And we just continuously gamble, and it's with people's lives. You said you had a third question, Bonnie?
Oh, actually, I feel like I've already asked you 4, but and Nikki's got her hand up. I did want to know whether or not you have a threshold of how many of teacher absenteeism. If you can't get subs and teachers are having to take on additional students, like what's the threshold for you? How many kids can a teacher actually have before in their classroom before it's not safe?
Well, and so safety is our primary concern. The secondary concern, though, is just continuing on with the academic program. Once you put multiple classrooms together, once you have the vice principal or the principal covering a class, when you take the learning assistance teacher out of their role and their students that they would normally see on a one-to-one basis or a smaller group size, their students don't receive any specialized learning anymore. Everybody's academic instruction is also getting impacted. And then you just say, well, what are we trying to do here? Is it just a large babysitting service? Or, what is the purpose here? And then again, back to the safety concerns, if we can't guarantee student safety, then that's a liability on school divisions. And they have to be very concerned if they're not able to ensure that a student who is high intensive needs, or even just regular students, that if there's unfortunately a fight in the playground and there's no staff out there to oversee and prevent that, if there's students who are leaving the playground and there's no staff out there to watch and monitor and be able to leave and talk to the students and try to bring them back. So all kinds of situations that we deal with. And so yeah, it's up to the school divisions to assess that. And usually though, it's on the backs of our teachers and our in-school administrators. And so like I said earlier, a concern for me is burnout immediately after a holiday. And that would be a really unfortunate scenario, that teachers are needing stress leave or time off from their job when they just got back from a supposed holiday. So yeah, it's completely unsustainable what we're doing right now, and it's unfortunate, because had we had the ability to take a couple of days to organize back into cohorts, address areas that are significant concern. So an example is heard yesterday of 2 situations in high schools in our province where there's no restrictions on the noon hour, and so students fooling around in the hallway eating their lunches together with no masks, and it really no ability to do anything in those situations, because they just say they're eating their lunch so they don't have to wear masks, and yet really they're using that as just sort of a hanging out time. And another situation of 300 students meeting for an hour or 45 minutes in a cafeteria with no masks on, of course, because they're eating, but a full cafeteria of students. And then we wonder why Omicron is spreading so fast in our province. So but having a couple of days to address those situations would have given us the ability possibly to prevent some of these situations from occurring. Mickey.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Are you in talks at all with the government regarding any contingency plans for, mass teachers to be taken out of the workforce due to Omicron?
No, and that's again, part of our concern when we were getting reports of teachers testing positive, getting reports of close contacts, or what are the requirements for isolation. They come to us with those questions, and when we start to add them up and realize we've got a lot of teachers here, it must be the same for educational assistants. It must be the same for school employees in general. Are we able to continue on offering a safe learning environment for students? And that's part of why our call for 2 days immediately after the break, part of it is just to assess that situation, have staff report to the school and be able to count and know exactly who is in the building, as opposed to just getting a whole bunch of calls on, if a school division opened on Tuesday, a whole bunch of calls Monday night or early Tuesday morning saying, I just tested positive, I can't come in. And it just seemed irresponsible for government not to heed that warning and say, yeah, we do need to understand what our staffing complement is. I've had a lot of situations, or compared this several times to the analogy of WestJet canceling approximately 15% of their flights because they have such significant staff shortages. If you can't fly an airplane safely, you can't fly it. It doesn't matter how much it inconveniences the business community or any other people. If you can't do it safely, then you need to call it. And that was part of our concern is, do we actually know in good faith that on Tuesday morning, we can provide a safe learning environment for students? And we didn't believe that that was a guaranteed yes. And that's why we thought our province should do similar to every other province, have some time to assess this. We weren't asking for 2 weeks like some other provinces where they, but every other province delayed because they agreed that they needed to assess the situation and make some contingency plans. And unfortunately in Saskatchewan, we didn't do that. Now the problem with that is that all students collected on Monday and Tuesday on the first day back, and it's too late now. They've all been in contact. Teachers have been, potentially exposed. We see the party that happened prior to the start of the return. And if those students are infecting teachers, then those schools are going to be in significant trouble. And, and of course, hard to predict what the actual outcome will be, but it's taking chances with our students and with our staff. And we just don't feel that's appropriate.
Today, Dr. Shahab said new recommendations will be based on keeping people at work, especially for frontline workers and essential services like educators. What do you think of the government's approach to this? Do you think they need to be acting sooner?
Absolutely. And new recommendations, we've been hearing about the possibility of new recommendations for quite some time now. Back then was the time to act. We've seen that been hearing since mid-November about how fast, how contagious Omicron is, and yet we sit on our hands here and just pretend like we're an island that won't get affected. It didn't work for the fourth wave. We were a national embarrassment for the fourth wave, and here, being the only province that doesn't have any kind of delays or move to online or something just to kind of slow that spread. On the one hand, I hear Dr. Shahab saying that we need to reduce the surge. On the other hand, I hear that schools need to be open and we're not putting any protective measures in our communities to protect our schools, and we're not putting any protective measures in our schools to protect our schools, like N95 masks. They're still not available in our schools, but yet health experts are saying those are the masks that protect you against Omicron. Well, why don't we have those in our schools then? And so it seems like government has been delaying and hasn't, we knew 2 weeks ago that these N95 masks are apparently better and the best at protecting. Then why has government not procured 200, 300,000 of those masks and sent them out so that students could be protected and that staff could be protected? And unfortunately, we're hearing now that, for example, that school divisions haven't asked for them. Well, government could be proactive and say, we don't need you to ask for them. We know that you need them. We're going to buy them and we're going to ship them out to you. And that's one thing that school division senior admin doesn't have to worry about. It just seems like it's a really backward system where everybody's waiting for someone else to do something. And the Teachers Federation seems like the only organization that is calling for some actual tangible action to be done here.
Sorry, can I sneak one last quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just regarding substitute teachers. Do they fall under your collective agreement? And what happens if they do get infected? Is it in our contract that they get paid? What happens to them? Or is it just like tough luck? They got to get unemployment or something? Yeah,
good question. So substitute teachers, and similar to a lot of things in education, things get a little bit overcomplicated for whatever reason. And so we have bi-level contract agreements. We have the provincial agreement, which covers many things like teachers' health plan and salaries. We have local agreements that covers things like leave provisions. And for some reason, way back in the day, Education Act writers decided that leave provisions, that substitute teacher salaries should be negotiated at the local level and teacher salaries should be negotiated at the provincial level. So it's a bit of a complicated situation. Benefits for substitute teachers are negotiated at the local level. And unfortunately, substitute teachers, there's no local contract that I'm aware of that they have provisions for sick leave. And so in the Education Act, they're described as being on daily verbal contracts. And so from day to day, you have a daily verbal contract. On Monday, if you get exposed in your school and you're ill and you can't come in Tuesday, you just simply can't accept the shift and don't get called and you're without pay. And so that's one of the reasons that we're, down in numbers with substitute teachers. They're nervous to get exposed, understandably. And then, of course, we also have a lot of substitute teachers who are retired teachers who, just choose for a little bit extra pay and to keep busy, and they enjoy coming into schools and working. And so they take on the role of substitute as well. Well, if, by nature, those retired teachers are generally the more elderly among us. And so they, are, usually 55 to 65 years old. And of course, they consider themselves at a little bit higher risk due to their age to get exposed to a virus just for earning a few extra dollars and coming in to substitute. So many of the retired teachers have taken their name off the list. And substitute teachers who we do have, of course, have concerns with getting contracting the virus as well. So lots of issues around substitute teachers. Those existed, some concerns with substitute teachers existed prior to the pandemic hitting. And there were school divisions that had concerns with adequate substitute teacher lists. And the pandemic has only made that situation, 100 times worse. So lots of concerns with just being able to get substitute teachers regardless of school division budgets. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions unless somebody puts their hand up in the next little while, but we'll leave it at that then. I really appreciate everybody joining today, and I wish we were under different circumstances where our schools are fully protected and that we felt confident that we could offer a safe learning environment for students. We really do want to reiterate the fact that in-person learning is our preference, and our call for 2 days of a pause at the start was in order to be able to assess that ability and in order to put measures in place to sustain in-person learning. And unfortunately, and hopefully government's gamble pays off and we don't have to worry about moving to online learning in certain school divisions or schools. But I guess, the future will tell for that. And so appreciate your attendance here today. And if you have any further questions, feel free to contact me through the Federation and we can handle those on an individual basis. Thank you, everyone.